have experiences of self-awareness. It also is the part of your brain that you use for motor activity and many other things that have to do with higher functions. And so we can look at the brain and different parts of the brain and see what is happening. The most interesting thing is that the way you think or reflect or actually practice self-awareness actually increases the number of neurons in your brain. This is called neurogenesis, and increases the connections between your neurons, which is called synaptogenesis. We have a part of the brain called the insula, which is buried between the frontal and the parietal lobes. And if you've heard of pratyahara, pratyahara is going within, withdrawal from the senses, and then the practices in yoga called kriyas and bandhas, that actually activates the insula, so you can control your body functions. You can lower your blood pressure, you can influence your heart rate, change your body temperature, and you can see what's happening in the insula. Fortunately, these days we can do this through things like MRIs or functional MRIs, and you can begin to map states of consciousness with and how they are represented in the brain. The reptilian brain is the midbrain, where we have what is called the startle response, which ultimately became the stress response. So if you go next to a reptile and you make a sudden noise or a sudden movement, reptile will attack you, a snake will bite you, or if you're a little further away, it will run. That's called the startle response, which became the stress response in us. So we don't bite, but we do the same thing by getting upset or going into road rage or shooting another person or running away. And stress has become the #1 epidemic of our civilization. So there are 3 basic brains that we have. The reptilian brain, which protects us in life-threatening situations through attack, fight or flight. The limbic brain, which is the emotional brain. And the limbic brain is only found in mammals. So it's not found in reptiles. And what the mammals are so called because they have breasts, they give milk, they don't lay eggs, they nurture their baby in the womb for the first few months, depending on which mammal. And then once the baby is born, they bond with the baby through love and through basically body language and through sounds and through tastes and through smells, which by the way also influences the microbiome, because the mother's bacteria and the baby's bacteria intermingle. In fact, the microbiome of a baby that's born naturally is very different from the microbiome of a baby that's born through cesarean section, because the baby that's born naturally goes through the canals and ingests the microbiome of the mother, and so on. We can look at the entire brain now. Amygdala is a part of the brain that mediates fear. So if you listen to somebody very carefully, their amygdala starts to shrink just by you listening to them, and they lose their fear. You don't have to respond, you just listen attentively, and you can influence the amygdala of another person. Okay, so this is pretty complex, but let me just share with you that how we can use this knowledge to our advantage, because every emotion that we feel has some kind of value, even the bad ones, but if they go out of whack, then they create illness. Human beings experience spiritual exaltation, peak experiences, they experience thrill of scientific discovery. As human beings, we experience love, compassion, empathy. It turns out that all these emotions enhance self-healing and self-repair mechanisms through the mechanisms I spoke to you about. And everything that we call human experience, like insight or intuition or creativity or choice or free will, creates its own biology. Intuition, creativity, vision, a sense of the sacred, are what we call the beginning stages of metabiological evolution, which is the evolution of consciousness and ultimately evolution of consciousness or self-awareness, which is called metacognition. I will skip all this history of the universe, so we won't have time into doing this, but basically this is the stages of evolution that we have been through. You know, as human beings, we've existed only for 200,000 years. Our reptilian brain is 300 million years, reptilian brain, the brain of the reptiles. So you can guess that's why humanity behaves like reptiles most of the time, which is terrorism and war and mechanized death and eco-destruction. Limbic brain, which is the emotional brain, has existed for 100 million years. So we are emotional creatures. We get angry, we get upset, we love, etc. And our cortical brain has only existed for 4 million years. So you can see why the world is a mess. We are not even in our puberty at the moment as a human species. Self-consciousness, 5,000 years, with the sages of the Upanishads, the Greek philosophers, the prophets of the Old Testament, written language about 5,000 years, and spoken language about 15,000 years. This is the history of our consciousness as the human species, but now we can go a little faster if we become aware of what's causing this. And what's causing the future of our evolution and the future of our biology, if we choose to go that way, is the connection between our moods, between our brain networks, between our hormone levels, heart rate, immune function, biology, blood pressure, everything that we call biological responses, sleep-wake cycles, dreams, all of that is a single activity. It's an integrated activity. No longer can we think of our bodies as bits and pieces. Our body and our biological organism and the universe are a single activity. Yatha pinde, tatha brahmande. And so mindful living, which is called vipassana, really is to be mindful of experience through the five senses, the five tanmatras as they are called, and also be mindful of our internal environment. All things that we can learn to do, our body, our breath, our heart, the viscera in our body, our emotions, images, feelings, thoughts, and then what Krishnamurti very intelligently called the awareness of awareness, which we call metacognition. Observing ourselves, having a sensory experience, so what is called intentional perceptual experience and self-observation. So here now is what we would say a modern way of describing the process of enlightenment. Not to take away from the great teachers like Patanjali and Vasishtha and Bhrigu and Bhardwaj and all the great sages, but to put it in a modern context. Non-reactivity, which means overriding our reptilian brain, which means that I kind of have an acronym over there. Before you react to anyone, you stop, you observe, you decouple automatic behavior. So, as His Holiness Dalai Lama also says, you know, if somebody upsets you or says something mean to you, just stop, take a few deep breaths, smile, observe your body, then proceed with awareness, love and compassion. And if you do it enough, you'll shut off your reptilian brain. It's a matter of practice. Activation of divine attributes, which in the great tradition of Buddhism are called gratitude, loving, kindness, compassion, joy, equanimity. Non-judgmental awareness of the external and internal world. Interoception, which is pratyahara, literally a thought methodology. Transcendence, which is samadhi. And metacognition, which is observing ourselves in any experience, what is called detached observation of your own behavior, but even more important, of the sensations, images, feelings and thoughts that occur in your consciousness. It's a very high form of vipassana that leads progressively to soul consciousness. Soul consciousness being aware of the observer in the midst of an observation, which is not difficult. Actually, you can right now, as you're listening to me, just turn your attention to who's listening. So as you're listening to me, be aware of who's listening. And that awareness you feel, that's your soul. That's the observer. Okay, it was there when you were a baby. It's there now. And it transcends space-time.
It's the beginning of how you open a current account. This is my personal experience. 18 years ago, I went armed with my import-export code number, with my passport, with my photograph, and my savings account details. I went to this nationalized bank. I said, मेरे को account खोलना है अपने import-export के लिए. The bank manager tells me, money laundering करनी है क्या? What do I say to that? I got up, went to a private bank, opened my account and started my business. So when there's a problem in opening a current account by a woman, loans की तो बात ही अलग है. So now you can answer all the questions you want to answer.
He has a place in Bangalore with 200 engineers, and we are doing a project called the Quantified Self, where every experience can be quantified in your body, picked up by your iPhone, analyzed by a supercomputer, and give you instant feedback if you want. Okay, and not only can we do that, we can then give people interventions how to improve their health and well-being. So we have a new startup. It's called Geo. Geo, as you know, means live, instead of just exist. So Geo will be launched in January and will be quantifying the self, but we also are looking at psychological tests, emotional well-being and spiritual well-being. And what we find slowly in people who actually engage in these wonderful ancient practices that have existed in our culture for thousands of years, you know, the great luminaries of the Upanishads were exceptions. India has always been a spiritual country, but we cannot judge India by its spirituality, given what we are experiencing in the world right now. India had luminaries who were trailblazers, but whose knowledge got lost. And today we have to give it a new shape and a new language. So what we are finding as we do these studies, that people who are experiencing higher states of consciousness seem to feel a shift in identity. They don't identify with their ego as much as with the larger identity. They have a shift in cognitive mechanisms, which means they have more insight, intuition, creativity, they are more inspired in life, they have a shift in their emotional well-being, they don't engage in melodrama, they're in touch with their emotions, they're in touch with the other people's emotions, and they know how to engage emotionally in a way that does not cause violence. They also have a shift in their perceptual mechanisms, in that they are able to look at things holistically. Their memories are sharper, but they're not victimized by their memories. They experience synchronicity or meaningful coincidences. They have a lot of creativity, and they know how to actualize their intentions. This is very preliminary research, by the way, but we are doing it at the moment. So, well, that's our next topic, which we'll skip for the moment. Qualia mechanics is the next frontier instead of quantum mechanics. It's understanding the qualities of consciousness. But I'll stop here. I don't know what time it is at the moment. What time is it? Perfect. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Good afternoon. I had a question. You had spoken about the reptilian brain, which you said is 300 million years old. But in our Indian way, we talk about the 4 yugas, the Satyuga, and the Dwapar, the Treta, and finally the Kali Yuga. And we have learned that as every yuga progresses, the human brain is actually getting more towards violence and more towards the negative aspects. So how would you explain this with that?
Well, as far as modern anthropology is concerned, we have no way of looking at any of the other yugas through what is called paleontology or anthropological studies. So let's make the assumption that everything I said is pertaining only to Kali Yuga. Okay?
That's not 300 million years old. So Kali Yuga is not 300 million years old, is it?
It could be, because when you directly translate the way our scriptures talk about years and the way we think in years, we may be talking about 2 different forms of mapping. You have to press a button. You got
Is it okay? Yeah. Good afternoon. I'm Namita, and I want to ask that, for we lay people, because this is, a bit too technical for us. I mean, in 2 or 3 ways, how effectively we can start our meditation. For starters, how to begin, and also the field of intention. I've read a few books of yours, how to, kind of regulate what we desire and well-being.
In that case, let me just lead everyone to beginner's meditation. How's that? And then we won't answer any more questions. We'll just end with that. That will be probably the best thing to do, right? Okay, so good. What I'll show you is very basic, okay? But we can take it to any level. But even if you start with this, yes.
Before we get into meditation, I just wanted to request if you could throw a little light on epigenetics. I had scanned through a little material by Bruce Lipton. I really couldn't absorb everything, and since you're here right in front of us, if you could just...
Epigenetics simply means how you turn on the good genes and turn off the bad genes. And the 5 things that will influence it more than anything else is good sleep, healthy emotions, exercise, yoga, meditation, all in one category. Food that doesn't damage your microbiome, and managing your stress. That's epigenetics, simple way. And we've learned a lot about it since Bruce Lipton, yes?
Dr. Chopra, honored to talk to you. My question was, when you talked of switching off the brain, the reptilian brain and things, and they say in the Upanishads, when a child is born, he says, Koham, Koham, who am I, who am I? And the universe responds by saying, Soham, you are what I am, that kind of thing. You have said also in meditation that we get in touch with ourselves. It's in one of your works that I've seen, that you get in touch with who I am. And I was looking at the word I am in Book of St. John, where Lord Jesus Christ is asked, who are you to tell us what we should do? And he says, Abraham was, but I am. And he's pelted with stones. So when it comes to a situation where you're looking at the larger picture and where we have to be, heading towards the state of wellness, which means merging with what the karmic DNA or what the universe has in mind for us, there has to be an acceptance of who we are and also a shedding of our imperfections. So how do you reconcile the 2?
Okay, the meditation might help in answering your question. But who you are is nothing that has form or name or exists in space or time or is even conceivable. But without that, there would be no form, there would be no names, there would be no conceptions. But that's a whole different discussion. Okay, yeah, he said, before Abraham was, I am that I am. No, let's do the meditation. Otherwise, we won't do the meditation. I think the more practical, the better, right? Is that okay? Okay, so sit comfortably, uncross your feet, sit with your back relatively erect, and keep your hands open. So the best thing is to keep your hands in your lap and keep them with your fingers facing upward, so they're easy and open, not in a fist, which is a gesture of anger. So relax, and let's please close your eyes. And I'm going to do a very simple meditation, but if you do it regularly, it has profound implications. So start with just observing your breath for a minute or so. Don't manipulate your breath, just observe it. Now allow your mind to settle